Hey, what is up, guys? Welcome back to the 24th episode of the Prime Life podcast. The man I have on today is actually friends with a few of the other people I had on the podcast, the Blood and Rain page and the Primal Thrive page. And when it comes to the no BS talk that has to be spoken about, this man has it all. You know, he's willing to share his viewpoint on controversial topics. He's willing to upset people and willing to talk about the things that, frankly, need to be talked about more than ever in today's society. So, Devin, how are you doing today?
I'm wonderful, Colin. I really appreciate you having me on the podcast.
Yeah, of course, man. You know, when I saw your page and saw some of the topics that you brought up, especially the one that you did most of your recent podcast about, which everyone should check out, the sex and relationships and how it's sacred. You know, I had to bring you on because there are so many guys and girls in my life who are frankly crying out for help that need to hear the things that you're talking about. And so, just to give you a platform today is an honor. And I think what we're going to talk about is going to change people's lives and hopefully help open them up to change other people's lives and sort of spread the goodness out, be a good moral character to kind of explain and share. So, what when it comes to your Instagram page and all the topics that you talk about, you didn't start off like that. You didn't sort of come into this scene, with the want to spread the goodness, spread the truth into people's
Mhm.
lives. Did you have a point of your life where you realized that this is something that needs to be done?
Yes. So, like you said, I wasn't posting the kind of content I post now originally, but around the time I made that Instagram account, I was already in the beginning steps of turning my life around. So, just to go back in time for a moment, I was in the Army at this time. This is around 2014. I was 23 years old. And like most soldiers, I was very hedonistic. That's just part of the culture of the military, and that's also very common for a lot of Americans in their late teens and early 20s. Just being a heathen, basically, not really caring, not really thinking of anything beyond the next impulse, right? So I was a good soldier. I wasn't having trouble professionally. It was my personal life that I wasn't putting in order, and I wasn't really paying attention to, and I wasn't really listening to the right people, such as my parents, such as certain people I was serving with who really did have it together morally. And while I certainly wasn't the most immoral of the guys I was working with, I definitely wasn't one of the better guys. And so what I found out, at least for me, because at this point I'd been a soldier for 5 years, I'd enlisted in high school. What I found out, at least for myself, was that I couldn't sustain living like a godless, agnostic, hedonistic lifestyle. I drank a lot, partied, went to bars, you know, just living 100 miles an hour, not really thinking beyond the next day. I was pretty much the embodiment of I'm here for a good time, not a long time. So um, it all came to a head. And even though the Army is a lot like college in that regard, where you can just party your butt off, well, when you combine that with the fact that being in the military is being in a warfare centric career field, and I already had a couple of tours under my belt. So I had, still had PTSD. And so the combination of those two things just did me in. And so the next thing I know, I'm at rock bottom, and God basically picked me back up. Even though I hadn't been paying him much mind, I hadn't been considering him in any of my decisions, he picked me back up, and I took the sign as, okay, I'm listening. This is my second chance. There were times where I could have died, probably maybe should have died, but I guess that wasn't written into my fate. And so I finally had that hard conversation with myself, and I finally had to confront myself and my decisions and how they all amalgamated into this moment, this humiliating moment. And so I finally decided to, for lack of better words, get my shit together. I finally just, it was time for me to be responsible, start acting like an adult, start taking accountability, and stop pointing the finger at anybody and anything else outside of myself, and realize that, well, this is all my fault. Even with things that happened outside of my control or outside of my decision making, like Jocko Willink says, everything is our fault, either because of a decision that we made or because how we're reacting to something outside of our control. And so I finally let that sink in and take root, and decided to live my life accordingly. And so from 2014 until now has just been an ongoing journey to me being the best version of myself, mentally, physically, spiritually, um, trying to undo all the damage I did to myself, to other people, just trying to be a better person, learn from my mistakes. Because I realized that in the time where I was living very hedonistically, I wasn't showing up the way that I was for my family, especially, but also my friends. Even though I was a reliable drinking buddy, that really isn't what my friends needed. And I wasn't being as good of a son to my parents. I wasn't being a good role model to my younger brother and younger sister. And so when I had that realization, then I understood that I had to do the right thing. I needed to do the right thing. And so that's really what this journey is all about. And so the content that I post is me sharing my own anecdotal evidence, as well as the evidence of other men like me who have basically found 100 ways not to do things, have learned every lesson the hard way, because I guess one of my faults is that I'm very stubborn. I had a lot of pride back then. I had a lot of pride and ego. And I think that's something that's common in a lot of men, a lot of young men especially. We get like this ego, like, oh man, I'm 10 feet tall and bulletproof. I can do what I want to. And if it feels good, then it must be right. But then I found out, well, sometimes yes, but oftentimes no. It requires deeper insight. It requires thinking before we act and thinking about the potential future consequences. Should I be doing this, or should I be doing it this way? And so that's probably the crux of the content that I share now is even though I can't go back in time and undo my mistakes, perhaps what I can do is make up for them by sharing this with other people who are still in either that young stage of life and they're being told the wrong things or having heavy peer pressure heaped upon them, or maybe it's someone closer to my age or even older and they're still caught up in those traps, so that they can understand that we can turn our lives around the moment we decide to. And it's not easy. And I'm not saying that I've had a perfect track record since then. Of course I haven't. I've still made mistakes. I've still made bad decisions. I've had relapses, so to speak. But I'm definitely making better decisions more often than I'm not. And so all of these smart decisions, all of these morally right choices have been compounding over time and have raised my vibration. And I'm happier now. I'm more content. I'm more fulfilled than I've ever been. And even on the days that don't go my way, they don't get to me the way that they used to, because my resilience is built up and I'm seeing things in a different perception.
Yeah, dude, I love that, and I think that there's a lot of beauty that can come out of the darkness in our lives, and you certainly are an example of being able to change that around into something that is there to help other people, and just reinforcing all the healthy lifestyle choices that you recognize that you need to make in order to live a fulfilling life. So in the place where you hit rock bottom, a lot of people would probably choose to sink even further down to hit new lows, worse, it'd be in a worse place than they were before. How did you make that decision to like truly seek something greater than yourself instead of letting all your failures and problems keep on weighing you down?
Well, without giving too much away, I was at a rock bottom where there was no more down for me. Like I was at the bedrock. There was no more further going down. Like my life had fallen apart. My chain of command was questioning if I could still do the job. I was in a terrible relationship, and I'm not heaping blame on the girl that I was with. It was both of our faults. We were both people who hadn't reconciled our traumas. My relationship with my family was at an all-time just high tension. It was terrible, and that was my own fault for just not acting right. And so I didn't really have any lower to sink. I was as low as I got. That's what I mean when I say I hit rock bottom. I mean, I really hit rock bottom. I had fallen into holes before, but I had never been laid this low in my life. I mean, I really knocked my own dick in the dirt this time. And so I didn't have it. So I had nowhere to go but up, because I wasn't dead. I was still alive. I was still breathing. I just had to make the decision to trust God with a second chance at life and then claw my way back up. And like I said, it wasn't easy. It was it was very painful. It required me to, well, I ended the relationship I was in, and then I apologized to my family, told them I was sorry for being an asshole, and just, taking it all on the chin and earning their trust back. They never stopped loving me, thankfully. I'm very blessed to have a wonderful family, but they had been understandably wounded by my actions. And so I had to build some trust back up with them. And that meant making certain decisions and making certain sacrifices, which, looking back, they weren't really sacrifices. So I stopped. One of the first things I did, one of the best things I did, I stopped drinking cold turkey.
Nice.
And I'm not going to rag on anyone who drinks alcohol. Some of my closest friends still drink, but they're not the type of guys who are going to bars and getting smashed, not getting shit-faced. I'm not friends with anyone who's an alcoholic. But for me personally, it just wasn't good for me. So I just stopped cold turkey, and it ended up paying off really well. I stopped watching porn. I stopped hanging around the wrong crowd of people. Now, of course, that caused some of those friendships to break apart. But there's a difference between having friends who really care for you, and they'll have those hard conversations because they care with you, which means telling you things that you don't want to hear, things that are very uncomfortable, and then having enablers. And before I decided to mature and grow, we were really just enabling each other's damages. Oh, well, we feel like crap. Let's go to the bars in Savannah and just get shit-faced. We weren't really confronting our problems. We weren't really celebrating anything. We were just medicating.
Yeah.
We were just medicating. It was just a coping mechanism.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, no, that does sound terrible. It sounds awful and sounds like a place that I feel like no one would really truly wish on their worst enemy once they truly understand the ramifications of where their mental state is at. And so you talk about God helping you out of that rut. How did you create a relationship that might not have been there truly before, or might have been a lot more minimal than it is now?
So I was raised a Protestant Christian growing up in rural Texas, like a lot of people that grow up in the Bible Belt. And then I enlisted in the Army at 17 when I was still a senior, graduated, went off to boot camp and all that. And then about 6 months after boot camp, I'm going on my first tour, which is in Iraq, and I'm 19 years old. And I had never been out of the United States before. I'd been to several different states in the U.S., but I'd never been in a different country before. And so I had no real understanding of what third world conditions are really like. And obviously I had no experience with warfare. I didn't really see the damage done. And so when I went there, the culture shock of the whole thing, seeing how these people were living just in absolute squalor. They didn't have running water. The kids weren't going to school because there wasn't school to go to. These people were undergoing hardships that I still can't really wrap my mind around because I've never been so unfortunate. But being that young and impressionable at 19, it really shook my faith, and it caused me to have a nihilistic outview on God. So I became agnostic, and my mentality with the divine became something like this, where I had decided that either God didn't exist or that he did exist. He created the world, but he didn't really love us. He didn't really care. He just kind of created us and just literally let us do our own thing. He wasn't really putting his hand in things the way I understand now. And so I became like I said, I became agnostic, and I stopped caring about spirituality, caring about religion. At that point, I had just committed to being married to my military career. And then later on, after I hit rock bottom, and I had that moment of realization where, oh, God is here because I didn't die, still alive, I can still come back. For me, it was acknowledging God. I think what was required of me was saying, okay, God, I'm listening. I'm listening to you. I'm not shutting you out of my life, because God gives us free will. I think this is something that flies over some people's heads when they want to disparage religion, or they want to disparage God, or they want to like a lot of atheists and agnostics want to bring up anti-religious arguments. Oh, well, if God real, why this happened, right? Well, it's the concept of free will. God gives us the free will to do what we want. We can do anything we want. There are consequences to whatever we do. but we ultimately have the free will. God's not really going to stop us from doing what we want. And that includes acts of cruelty, acts of depravity, acts of evil, whether they're outwardly destructive or self-destructive. And so it was just acknowledging God's presence and his role as the creator. And so once I was able to do that, once I was able to acknowledge God and let him back in my heart and form this covenant with him, that opened the door to everything else.
Yeah. And
that was the first step, and it was definitely the most important.
Dude, for sure. That's beautiful. And so when you saw that door open and all the possibilities of the beauty that your life could look like started becoming a reality, what did you realize had to change?
So, like I said before, I realized that I had certain destructive patterns of behavior that I had to get rid of and switch out for better things. Mm-hmm. Also, I needed to change the narrative of my life, meaning that I had to change the way that I looked at myself, what I told myself, because I had a lot of insecurity because I was lacking things in my life that weren't giving me that fulfillment. And a lot of it was the lack of spiritual fulfillment. And so I had to change how I saw the world. Living a life without God, like I said, it made things very dark. It made things very nihilistic, where I was just living by the skin of my teeth from one moment to the next. Felt like an animal almost. I wasn't really thinking of, well, what about the afterlife? What about marriage and kids? Do you want to be a granddad? I was just thinking, well, I'm in the Army. It's exciting. It's objectively exciting because it's so intense. I'm just going to do this, and whatever happens, happens, right? It was very much go with the flow. And there's times in life where going with the flow is fine, but only dead fish go with the flow is what I come to realize. And so I needed to grab the reins of my own life because, again, with me at least, this go with the flow concept that I was living by was really just me alleviating any accountability I had over my life. I was just letting the world push me where it wants. And, you know, there's bad characters in the world who don't have our best interests at mind, whether they're other people or like the devil. You know, they're always going to tempt us to indulge in our base urges, our base desires. And so I wanted something different. I had seen that what I was doing led me to rock bottom. And it was by my own actions, so I'm not blaming other people. And so I now decided, okay, now it's time for me to start going with the flow, start, you know, learning how to swim. And now I'm going to be mindful of what I do, what I say, how I say things. And it wasn't easy. It wasn't a night and day change. This took time to shed those old skins and break out of my patterns of behavior. Like, this seems like a very simple thing, but just one of the things was to stop cursing so much, because being an enlisted soldier in the Army, especially in combat arms, because I was field artillery, every other word we would say was the F-bomb. Like, I would drop 5 F words in like a 7-word sentence. And that was like me and every guy that I worked with. And within the military, or, you know, it's fine to have those locker room conversations when it's just you and the guys. But I was talking like this in front of my mom and my grandma. And, you know, I come from a conservative Southern family, and that's not how they had raised me to talk. And before this shift inside, I didn't care that they reacted that way. My mentality was, oh, F it, I'm the way I am, and that's just how it is. Like, you know, take it or leave it. But that's not how we should treat our family. That's not how anybody should talk to their parents, you know, especially their mother. You know, my dad didn't mind my cursing so much, but he didn't like it when I would curse in front of my mom and my grandma. So just policing up my language and giving them that respect, like, you're my mom, you're my grandma, you don't deserve to hear me speak like this. You don't deserve to be worried about my drinking habits. So just alleviating a lot of their stress. I think that those actions, not my words, but my actions, showing that I was making the necessary changes, I think that alleviated a lot of their stress about me, because they were always worried about me. They were worried about my state of mind. And anytime they would ask me if I was doing okay, I would just lie and tell them, like, yeah, I'm doing fine. Mm-hmm. But obviously I wasn't. My actions were saying something else. But through switching out my old patterns of behavior, I was able to I have a better relationship with my parents now than I ever have. I have a better relationship with anybody in my life than I ever could have given them before that. So, and those relationships are vital because we are social creatures. You know, this whole lone wolf concept is bullcrap. We need other people. We might not need the entire human population, but we need a certain amount of people in our life to have good, healthy bonds with and trust with and mutual reciprocation. And so one of the first things I did was I rebuilt my relationships. I really did some introspection on my friendships, and that's how I decided who I needed to stop spending time with, because we were just enabling each other's destruction, and then who I could still keep in my life. And some of those guys where we were enabling each other, we're still friends to this day, but we have a different kind of friendship because we all took the same route of, okay, these patterns of behavior aren't serving us. We need to be better than this. And because those guys had always been loyal to me versus the other guys that I eventually cut ties with, they weren't really being loyal to me. I was just a drinking buddy, and that's okay. I don't hold that against them. But you know, once I stopped being, you know, kind of like a hedonistic drinking buddy, then they lost use for me. And you know, like I said, it's okay. So maturing and being mindful, and then, like I said, just making the necessary changes really helped me out. It kept me from being held back as long as I could have been.
You know, I think the quote that comes to mind when you talk about your journey that really speaks for mine and your life is that you become the people that you surround yourself with. And that can be either extremely good or extremely bad based on your friends. And so, you know, I think that the quote of your friends only love you because you're like them also kind of stands a little bit
Right.
too. There's obviously going to be the people in your life that will love you regardless. Your parents, really close friends who you share a bond that I think goes with a lot deeper than maybe your shared interests. But I think that being in a place where you can recognize that someone is either a detriment or a benefit to your life is very necessary in order to grow. And so
Right.
for all the people in today's society who are chasing that hedonistic lifestyle because that's what they've been told by society, by media, maybe someone who's going through high school right now who has a porn addiction, drinks alcohol on the weekends or even every day, and just is constantly stuck in this rut where they are unable to accept what they need to change. How would you open them up to the horizons that are possible through God and through embracing that self-improvement process?
Hmm. It's really difficult to do that because when I look at myself when I was 18, 19 years old and up until my early 20s, there were already people telling me these things that I tell the people now, and I wouldn't listen. My dad was telling me these things, and I always trusted my dad. I knew my dad was speaking from his own experiences of when he was, you know, had a kind of a heathen streak when he was, you know, in high school. But I wouldn't listen. I was so stubborn. Um, this isn't easy for me to accept, but there are some people who I can look them right in the eye and be in the same room as them, and I can show them anecdotal evidence from my own screw ups why this stuff is destructive, and they're going to go and still find out the hard way themselves. Unfortunately, there are certain people, whether they're boys or girls, that they're just going to learn the hard way no matter what. And perhaps at that time in their life, they just serve as an example of what not to be for those who are capable of being more conscientious. But for those who are trying to stay the course and they have this, maybe this gnawing feeling inside them. Maybe it's their heart telling them, this is wrong, this is bad, this isn't making you feel good, this isn't giving you what you want, this isn't filling that void, and whatever that void is, whether it's a fulfilling romantic relationship, so they watch a lot of porn, they subscribe to OnlyFans, they're sleeping around casually. Maybe they're hanging out with the wrong crowd of people because things at home aren't so good with their parents. Maybe their sibling abuses them. Maybe their father molests them. Who knows, right? We don't get to choose our environment at all. I understand why people get into destructive patterns of behavior to cope, because I've used a lot of destructive patterns of behavior to cope, to medicate myself. But the sooner that you can have these conversations with yourself, the sooner that you can stop letting your insecurity run your life for even a moment, and just consider the possibility that maybe what you're doing is wrong. Maybe what you're doing is holding you back. Then maybe you can understand that you can take control of your life. God is here. He's not going to force you into a relationship with him. God gave us free will, and this is something that's said in all three Abrahamic faiths. And I don't know as much about different pagan faiths or Eastern religions, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's in those scriptures as well. But I know from my own life and the life of many other high-value men who are good men and they're good at being men, you can turn your life around anytime you decide to. It's not always going to be easy, and depending on the environment you're in, it may be next to impossible. But understand that God tests every one of us. I think a lot of the reasons why people stay in this pattern of habits, and I know, speaking for myself for sure, is because they're angry at God. They get angry that God made the world the way it is. It's not this paradise. People aren't always nice to each other. Sometimes people die, they get raped, they get trafficked. We have all sorts of terrible things happen to us. Some kids lose their parents and they get orphaned, or like I said, their parents are there, but their parents really suck. They're not a good mom, they're not a good dad. Maybe their siblings are crappy. You don't have to be like your parents if your parents have really bad habits, and you don't have to be like your siblings if your older siblings have bad habits. You can be whoever you choose to be. And I would say that if you're just in a bad environment overall, I grew up in a series of trailer parks, so it wasn't easy finding good friends to hang around all the time. I had a lot of what I call friends of consequence. They were my friends because they lived right down the road from me, so we had nobody to hang out with. So we'd go hang out together, and those kids would get me in a lot of trouble sometimes. But then sometimes I would get them in trouble because we kind of just pinged off of each other's, bad habits and the urge to rebel against our parents. But the sooner that you can have these conversations with yourself and realize that you can have agency over your own life, you can switch out your habits, you can stop drinking, and also understand that when you're at this age, you are vulnerable to peer pressure. I know peer pressure really, really sucks. I know it sucks. It's so easy to cave in, especially for women. Women probably cave to peer pressure faster. They tend to be a bit more social. I mean, men will go and live out in the wilderness by themselves, at least for a period of time. You almost never hear about women doing that, especially nowadays. Mm-hmm. If you're around people that are encouraging you to do something destructive, like, oh, start an OnlyFans account. Oh, hey, dude, come check this porn out. Or just drink this beer, smoke this joint, or take these pills. You should you should definitely reevaluate if those people really care about you, or if they're just caught up in their own coping mechanism, because at the end of the day, misery loves company. Yeah. There are plenty of people who are miserable. They don't want to be miserable alone. They want to have someone else share their misery with them because it provides them a small comfort. But that comfort's not sustainable, and it's not real, because what it is y'all are mutually destroying yourselves together. You're going on a downward spiral, and sooner or later you're going to hit rock bottom. It's not a coincidence that a lot of people who have suicidal ideation or who just go on to commit suicide, they had alcohol problems, they had porn problems, they had drug addictions, they had addictions to all sorts of terrible things, which a lot of which really just center around dopamine release. They weren't getting fulfilling things in their life. They didn't have fulfilling relationships with other people. And they also had a negative self-view of themselves. We're all responsible for our own self-esteem, all right? Other people can gas you up all they want to, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you have a genuinely good thing about your character and your friends and your family recognize that in you and they honor you for that, that's a good thing. Yeah. But at the end of the day, we're all responsible for our own emotions. It's not our fault that we feel certain things, but what we do with those emotions, that's on us. That's on every one of us. And, even though you're in high school, and you may not be a full-blown legal adult. Maybe you're not old enough to drink yet. Maybe you're not old enough to buy tobacco. You're old enough to understand the difference between right and wrong. The sooner that you can stop your bad habits, the sooner you can stop accruing damage, because this damage compiles itself over years. And so let's say you start some type of bad habit when you're 14 or 15, you start having sex casually, you start watching porn, you start drinking, doing drugs, whatever. There's 100 traps we can fall into. The sooner that you recognize that that stuff is destructive for a reason, and that maybe your so-called puritanical parents aren't being so puritanical, they're actually trying to look out for you. The sooner that you can recognize that those habits aren't really serving you, they're just dulling a deeper pain that you need to sooner or later have a face-to-face encounter with and defeat, the sooner you can stop compiling damage, because you don't want to start something like that when you're a teenager and then be 25 and just look how many years you lose up to a decade at a time. You're not going to get that time back.
Yeah.
None of us are going to get that time back. That's a fantasy that people trap themselves in all the time. Well, if I could go back in time and do this, if I could go back in time and do that. Hey, look, I get it. I catch myself thinking that way sometimes. Like, man, I fudged up this one opportunity for a job, for a relationship, for a friendship, for some opportunity that could have served me. But at the end of the day, I just had to say, well, you screwed that up. But check this out. If you decide to make your life better by being better, those opportunities can present themselves in the future, even if your self-esteem is really low and it's telling you that they won't pop up, or you just got a crowd of bad characters around you, the type of people like, oh, you're not going to amount to anything, blah, 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 blah. Hey, look, those people don't decide your circumstances. And when people are telling you stuff like, you're this, you're that, you're this, you're that, and it's all a bunch of negativity, understand that they're projecting their own insecurity. They're projecting their own lack of self-worth, lack of self-love. People that actually love themselves, they give love to other people. Now, they might give you tough love. They might, hold you accountable and call you out on bad habits. But in general, they're very polite and kind to other people. They're trying to spread that love around. So learn how to love yourself as well. Definitely learn how to love yourself. If you can't love yourself, and this is something I struggled with, if you don't learn how to love yourself, you can't love other people to the capacity that they need from you. And also, you're not going to be able to forgive yourself. All right, look, I've made more bad decisions, regrettable decisions than I can count, and it used to erode at my self-esteem. I still have times where all of a sudden I'll remember something really foolish, really hedonistic that I did that I shouldn't have done, that I would never do nowadays. And I think, oh man, in that moment, I was a real piece of shit. But do I sit here and beat myself up for it? No, I don't, because then I get caught in a cycle and my self-esteem starts to erode. And if I tell myself that that's all I'm worth, then it's very easy to continue onto that downward spiral and maybe fall back into those habits. Instead, what I do is I say, okay, this is a reminder to never do this again. And that feeling of guilt that you feel in yourself when you do something that you shouldn't be doing, that's your reminder to stop and never do it again. And if you've already broken that habit, or you're on the path to breaking that habit, whenever you just have those memories, those regrettable memories of something you did, like, maybe you got really drunk and puked and made a fool of yourself or something, right? That's your conscience speaking to you and saying, hey, don't forget, if you ever get tempted to make this decision again, this is likely to happen to you again, and maybe it'll be worse.
There's a massive difference between shame and guilt. Guilt is there to remind us of what we need to change and what we need to constantly be reevaluating in our life. And then the shame is there to kind of push us back into that terrible cycle that ruined our lives either before in the past or is ruining our lives in that moment. I also really like what you said about being a good example for other people. I think that morally, we have a much larger impact on the world around us than we think. Our actions have serious consequences, but can also have serious benefits to those around us. So by being a good example, you really do spread the goodness that is possible of humans, but by not speaking up to the evil or participating in the evil that is around you, you go a step that is almost terrifying to think about, and you are encouraging that evil, that bad, that bad shit to spread to other people and to reap untold amount of damage on their lives, the damage relationships, and ultimately make the world a worse place than it was before. And so I think that you being able to speak out about that stuff right now is a massive benefit to the people around us, because no one is saying it. No one in society is talking about the damage of porn, sex, addiction, bad relationships, and being able to speak about that in today's day and age, it's certainly, you are a blessing for me. You're a blessing to everyone around us, and being able to talk about this with you has been a blast. And so to kind of elaborate on maybe a few more individual topics regarding morality, because I think that everything truly does come back to morality at the end of the day. You're either benefit or detriment to the world, that you leave your lasting impact. Relationship wise, I think that our relationships have either the ability to create a lot of joy in the world between the two married couples and other people, or to spread a lot of evil. And so when it comes to people in today's society, how can someone set a relationship up between man and woman to be the good that it's meant to be?
So, like I touched on earlier, the relationship, like my first adult relationship was, it was just a disaster. There's a lot of drama. That one relationship was sufficient for me to learn 90% of what not to do with a woman, and also what to look out for when choosing a partner. So, speaking as a man, we're more or less visual creatures. We go for looks first, and for some of us, that's all we look for. Like if we're really not that calibrated and we really don't have a healthy understanding of how to vet for a potential partner, sometimes it begins and ends at, oh, that girl's really hot, like I'm just gonna go talk to her and we're gonna see what happens. That might suffice if you're gonna have like a one-night stand or a fling or something casual that's not going to last. But for those of you who are seeking something long-term, especially for those of you who want to meet someone who can become the love of your life, you know, have this incredible deep bond with each other, it's, you know, just romantic in every capacity, and you end up married, maybe have kids, you really need to understand what red flags are. And a lot of times, if you're paying attention, your conscience, your gut feeling, you'll know those red flags by the gut feeling you're getting. When their actions are not matching their words, when there's a lot of contradictions, the way that they behave, you know, maybe they're nice to you. Are they nice to other people? You know, are they nice to the waiter at that coffee shop you took her out to or took him out to? Pay attention to your partner. If they're doing a lot of things that you don't vibe with, that's a really good sign that they're not for you. And it doesn't mean that you have to castigate them and treat them like crap. Be like, oh, you're a piece of shit, you're a terrible person. You know, yeah, sometimes they are. Sometimes they are a piece of shit. You know, that's just the phase of life that they're in. Other times, it's just a simple sign that they're not for you. You know, you can date someone that isn't doing anything wrong. They're not cheating on you. They're not mistreating you. You don't see them mistreating other people. They don't have bad habits. But if you're not feeling that chemistry between them, if you're not feeling a chemistry where you are just intangibly drawn to that person, you can't stop thinking about them, that's also a good sign that maybe they're not for you. If you're not feeling something deeper than, okay, they're pleasant to be around, you really need to ask yourself, what can you do with that? Is this relationship going to last? Or should you stop leading them on, because you are, knowingly or unknowingly, you can lead that person on. And just because you're not feeling that chemistry doesn't mean they're not. So you don't want to lead someone on and potentially cause some emotional damage.
Yeah.
This is also where the casual sex thing ties in. So high value men don't want to be with women who have a high body count. Now, it's not easy finding a girl who's a virgin. You know, there's these guys who have this, you know, ideal trad wife, almost like a build a girlfriend thing in their mind, where, oh, she's got to be like 18, a virgin, a 10 out of 10, and looks like a unicorn, right?
Yeah.
And maybe you'll draw a girl like that. You know, it's certainly possible. It's certainly possible. Or maybe you won't. You know, maybe maybe she doesn't have every habit that you like. Because at the end of the day, you have to quit putting women on a pedestal. A mistake that a lot of guys do, and some girls do this with guys too, we tend to put people on pedestals and we make them a fantasy rather than a reality. We need to understand that no matter how good someone looks, no matter how pretty that girl is or how handsome that guy is, we're all human. Mm-hmm. We all make mistakes, you know, and you know, those girls, they're not perfect either. That's not a bad thing. I'm not insulting them. I love women. I don't have a problem with women, but they're human. They don't, you know, a girl who has a good head on her shoulders, she doesn't want to be put above the man that she's with, because now she's just walking on him. Now he's a doormat.
Yeah.
Don't put these women on a pedestal because they can't possibly live up to this fantasy you built in their head. They're going to let you down. And that pressure that you're putting on that girl, it's not fair. And for the women who are listening to this, it's the same thing with your man. Your man is not perfect. He's going to make a decision that you don't always like agree with. It doesn't mean it's the end of the world. If it's a relatively, as long as your partner's not violating a deal breaker such as infidelity or getting into like a bad drug habit or drinking a lot or becoming abusive, most things can be talked about. And I'll tell you something that through my own experiences and just what I've seen at large is I've noticed that a lot of people have trouble committing. They have trouble with commitment. And that's because I played part of this on the internet and then the other part on like the porn epidemic, online prostitution with OnlyFans, and also the social acceptance of sleeping around. The sexual, like the dating marketplace, the sexual marketplace, it can be very confusing and it can also be overwhelming. You can go on Instagram right now and see millions of objectively attractive women, right? Mm-hmm. They're all over the place and you can just slide in their DMs anytime you want to, and girls can do the same thing for men. And they're all over the place, living in different countries, living in the same state you are, all over. And so having all of those potential choices, sometimes it gets overwhelming and you find yourself kind of stuck like, oh, who do I choose? Who do I choose? Well, look, don't worry about that. There are more attractive women on this earth right now than you could ever walk up to and approach for the rest of your life. And it's the same thing with men, for you girls.
Yeah.
So you're going to have, if you want a relationship, if you want to have a deep, enduring relationship, we're going to have to learn as a society how to commit to somebody and not leave them the moment that maybe they say something that offends you that you don't agree with. Yeah. Or, we all need to have a clear understanding with our partners, with the people that we're with. We need to have a good conversation about boundaries. These are certain boundaries that are deal breakers. So, okay, if I cheat on you or you cheat on me, this relationship is over. We violated the trust. If I become abusive towards you or you become abusive towards me, we're going to end the relationship. Anything outside or more or less below those deal breakers, anything below that can be worked through. It can be talked to. It can be forgiven.
Yeah. And
so rather than just monkey branching from one girl to the next or from one guy to the next, understand that relationships, they're an ongoing process. They're an ongoing work, because while you're sitting there focused on growing and becoming more and more as a man or a woman, your partner is doing the same, or they should be. Relationships are an investment. We're investing ourselves, our entirety, into this one individual person, to this one woman or this one man. And so when you make a commitment to a man or a woman, you're also committing to holding them accountable when they start to slide off the path. I mean, look, people get exhausted. Growth is exhausting. And there's times where burnout happens or unfortunate life circumstances happen. Maybe your boyfriend or husband got laid off from a job, or maybe the same happened with your wife or your girlfriend. Are you going to leave them the moment shit hits the fan, or are you going to be ride or die and stand by them? Yeah. Because if you can't be ride or die, I'm going to tell you right now, you don't deserve to be anyone's fucking wife or husband. Because marriage is a covenant between man and woman that is ordained by God. And so if you're this guy who thinks that he's going to get on his knee and ask this woman to be his wife, and if you're going to be the one that says yes to this dude, that's the moment where it's like, okay, it's ride or die.
Yeah. No.
Stand by them and help them grow. And again, if they violate a deal breaker, okay, that's different. Then yes, maybe it is time to split and go your own way. But understand that relationships, they're a continuous investment. They're a continuous pattern of accountability. And as long as you're both striving towards the same path and you're not diverging, but rather converging in the same direction, you're going to be fine. Is the honeymoon phase going to last forever? No, but you can always reignite it later down the road.
Yeah, yeah. No, when it comes down to that, I think the true idea of commitment that you brought up is one of those things that where people in society that we see nowadays, they leave themselves outs constantly, excuses that they will use eventually when it comes down to it. If you leave yourself an out for those things that should be excusable, you will use them eventually. I think that when it comes to violence, infidelity, those are obviously two very different deal breakers. But when it comes down to the other small things that people are just unwilling to work through, know that as they get into the relationship, it certainly is extremely detrimental and has an effect around you that just constantly does no good for the world. And so looking into relationships, when it comes down to a relationship where two people, they're both attracted to each other, they've built up trust, they have the same values, more or less. Maybe one person is working on them and maybe a little bit less developed than the other person, but they are on the right track when it comes to faith, when it comes to being devoted to the other person. And when it gets to the point where they have to ask themselves the questions that are a little bit more serious, when two couples maybe they've in the past they didn't wait to marriage, in a situation like that, how can they heal in the moments, heal so that they don't the shame doesn't become a problem, but so that they can still continue to foster that relationship, because there is something there, it shouldn't be abandoned, but there might be a lot of stress from society and from their own desires from having indulged that other side.
Right. What I've noticed works for me. So for the guys who are really trying to live the trad lifestyle and you're trying to attract the traditional woman, if you end up with a woman that you're really feeling it with, she's attractive, she's taking care of herself, she's doing her best to grow past the crappy decisions that she made, including former partners. If you're going to be with this woman, you are going to have to buck up and find the strength to forgive her for that.
Mm-hmm.
You're also going to have to understand your standards. What is the maximum amount of sexual partners that you are okay with this prospective wife having? But this also goes the same way with females. Women, how many men or how many partners, past partners, are you okay with your man having? And as far as the couple having that talk, look, it takes a lot of courage to admit our sins to someone that we care about, because we're afraid, like, oh, are they going to run off or whatever. And I know for women, that whole slut defense thing, it's very real, because they understand that with every sexual partner that they have, it makes it harder for them to pair bond. And I mean, like I've said before, I don't know what the limit is. I don't know how many partners someone can have before they're essentially damaged goods and they can't pair bond with anybody anymore. It's probably not in the double digits, but that doesn't mean that you should keep doing that. You should still stop and heal yourself. I believe personally that a lot of proper therapy, not pharmaceutical psychiatric drugs, but proper therapy, as well as having a really strong connection with God, praying for forgiveness, and just doing what you can to mitigate the damage, I think that's vital. Mm-hmm. I don't know what people can do to get the imprinting out of their system. I'm not sure. I'm sure a lot of that is, like with most things that we heal from, a lot of it is time away from it will heal it. But as far as if a guy is going to commit to a girl who's, she didn't save her virginity for him, I understand that can be disappointing. You want to be this girl's only partner. I totally get that. I don't know a single guy who doesn't feel that way. Every guy I've ever spoken to has felt the same way that they wish that their girl would have saved their virginity for them, right? It's just a thing, and that's just how we feel. But at the end of the day, we usually end up with who we deserve, and understand that if you've also slept around, you're not perfect either. You know, you're not perfect in that department. And so it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of risk. You know, courage does not exist without risk. If there's no risk, there's no courage. Find the courage to tell your partner that you've slept around before. You don't have to go into graphic, explicit details.
Yeah.
And you certainly don't want to rub it in their face and say, well, I enjoyed it and all this and all that. Like that doesn't matter, and that can do more harm than good. But just simply acknowledging the truth. You don't want to lie to your partner, because lies always reveal themselves later on down the road. You know, something's going to come up, and there's never a convenient time for when it rears its ugly head. That's why they say the truth will set you free. It will set you free. It might be fucking painful. It can be embarrassing. It can be humiliating. It can cause you to feel anguish inside you, and you may not get the reaction from your partner that you're hoping. They might feel pain too, because you're in this relationship where they love you, and you're talking about sticking it out together for the rest of your lives. But if your partner loves you and you didn't do anything outside of their personal preferences for a partner, then I'd wager they'll be able to move past it with you. And look, it might not be easy, but I'll say this as well. You know, if your partner has admitted to sleeping around and it really hurts you and it really affects you, don't heap that pain you feel onto them. Don't suspect, unless they explicitly tell you that they don't feel ashamed for it. And even if they don't, understand that their feelings are theirs. Whatever you feel inside, it's not for you to project upon them. Shame has its place, but shame is an extremely potent weapon, and it can be used to fucking destroy people. It's being used to destroy people right now because a lot of the radical leftists, they use a lot of shame. We're seeing it right now with Black Lives Matter, shaming white people just for being white, like, oh, you're inherently racist. But I'm not going to go digress into a tangent on that. But that's just to illustrate.
That's for the next podcast we do together.
Yeah, for sure. That's just to illustrate how deadly shame can really be. It can shatter somebody. It's, you know, it's not a physical tool. It's like a psychological, emotional tool. And women in particular can be really broken by that. And that just goes to female dynamics, because at the end of the day, the realm of physicality, that's more men. We usually solve our problems with physicality when words have been expended and they're not doing anything. With women typically don't use physicality. Yes, there's exceptions, but they're the exception. Most women use shame against other women, and they'll use shame when attacking their partner or someone else that they feel has slighted them. Understand the potency of shame, and understand that if your partner in that moment of vulnerability is revealing something that they're ashamed of, you don't need to heap more shame on them. They already feel the shame. And if they can feel the shame, that's a good sign. It means that they have a conscience. It means that they're not some type of psychopath, sociopath. That shame is the soil from which the seed of growth can sprout from.
Yeah.
Rather than you heaping more shame on them and knocking their fucking self-esteem into the dirt, which for all you know, they have spent years building that self-esteem up, or maybe they're just starting to build that self-esteem up. What you need to do is you need to hold space for them that is full of love and understanding and acceptance and acknowledgement, so that they can grow. Because if you don't do that, you don't understand the potential that she or he has, especially if this is a woman. You're hindering her from growing into the beautiful woman that she could be and should be.
Yeah.
And again, I know that this isn't easy, especially for a younger guy. His gut reaction might be just to lash out in anger. And I don't mean lash out physically, but with words. But you need to understand, once words spill out of our mouth, you don't get to take those words back. Don't set yourself back further than you have to. All right?
Yeah. Dude, I love
Find
that.
the strength to hold space for that woman when she's being vulnerable. And that just look, that right there, that first off, I had to learn that the hard way. Secondly, um, that goes for any time a woman's talking to you, anytime a woman's being vulnerable with you, confiding in you, and really just being your woman. You are the man. It is your job to be that rock that she can lean on when times are hard. Not all the time, but when times are tough for her and she just needs to talk to you, when the chips are down, you need to be able to hold that space for her, and you need to be a rock. You need to guide her through the rough waters.
Mhm.
But that is especially true anytime she is being vulnerable with you and revealing things to you, whether it's past trauma, past bad decisions she's made. It's very important that you don't project your own anger, your own disappointment, your own jealousy. Don't keep that shit on her, because all that's going to do is it's going to knock her self-esteem into the dirt. It's going to ignite resentment in her, and then she's going to start to wonder, well, can I trust this guy? Because now he's just going to, he's going to verbally beat me up about it, and he's never going to let that shit go. Guys, you got two choices. You can walk away. If it's just too much for you to handle, you can walk away, or you can fucking sit there and commit to her, and you can help her grow out of it. You might be the one who helps her grow up past it. And then she just grows into an even more beautiful, vibrant woman, and you journey together. And who knows, she might be the best wife you could have ever asked for. She could have been better than you ever envisioned, but you won't know if you don't handle it right.
Yeah. Dude, I love that. And it's like talking about that seed growing into something that could be so beautiful that has to be handled. I think one of the big things that comes up, and I think that the large thing that causes problems in relationships does end up being sex, in its various forms. And so when two people make that commitment to God, and maybe in the past they weren't faithful, but now they're working together towards marriage, and obviously they to be working towards that, they should be staying away from stuff that leads into sin, and sex being that sin. How would you recommend guys, especially because I know a lot of guys who have very active libidos? How would you recommend them put that aside and control themselves for the time being, even if it's years down the road? And that's not something that they can really control. But how would you recommend that they keep the marriage bed holy and keep everything undefiled in that sense?
Right. So as far as putting your libido aside, it's not going to go anywhere. There is no putting our libido aside. I'm taking this from Alexander Cordes, who's just an awesome man. So what he said is that all male energy is sexual energy, and he's right. He is right about that. All of our energy is sexual energy, and that's not a bad thing. I know that kind of currently men who are very masculine and very energetic, very manly, we catch a lot of crap from feminists like, oh, you're toxically masculine and yada yada yada. Look, there's nothing wrong with having a sex drive. That just means that you're in line and in tune with your biology. We are driven to procreate. That's our job in this world as men, is to create. All right, create. Whether it's creating babies with our wife, or creating works of art, creating a community. Our job is to create. So rather than worrying about how can I put my sexual energy aside, what I found is helpful for me, and this is something that a lot of the men within our circle and our sphere of influence have also determined, is channel that energy into other things. Look, man, I'm in my prime. I'm horny all the time, dude. Like to be a guy with high testosterone. I'm sure you have the same issues, man. You're a very masculine guy. But I know what helps me. This is why I like to go lift weights first thing in the morning. I get up and it's like, okay, we're gonna go to the gym. Even if I don't feel like it, if I know that I have a workout that day, I get up and I go to the gym, because I'm tempted to masturbate. I'm tempted to do something with that energy. It's like, okay, masturbation is not the key here. Watching porn is not the key here. Calling up some girl that will say yes to coming into my bed without, going through the proper channels of courtship first, that's not the answer. That's not what I want. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get up. I'm going to walk 30 seconds down the street to the campus gym, and I'm going to go do some deadlifts. I'm going to go do some pull-ups. I'm going to do some push-ups. I'm going to sweat this out of my system.
And, you know, the times where I failed and I ended up masturbating or whatever, I always regretted it. But the times where I I stayed the course and I didn't, and I went to the gym and I just had this awesome workout, I never regretted that. At the end of the day, a masturbation addiction or a masturbation habit, that is the man's inability to control that sexual tension, that urge to release. Because look, masturbation's easy. All you have to do is go somewhere where someone can't see you, you know, four walls, a ceiling, and a closed door, and just, you know, 5 minutes, bam, you're done. You've released the tension, right?
Mhm.
But that's not good for us. It's just, it's a dopamine hit and that's it. But it's not even a fulfilling dopamine hit. Masturbation does not equate to good sex, and casual sex does not equate to sex with like your wife, someone that you're in love with, have a deep relationship with. Channel your sexual energy into physical fitness, channel it into building stuff. You know, pick up a trade, learn how to work with wood and carpentry, work with stonemasonry, something. Start building a garden. Go do some manual labor. There's a multitude of things that we can do to get that energy out of our system and basically distract us from the thoughts of, I want to, you know, pull up porn. I mean, look, porn is easy. We carry the portal to porn in our freaking pockets with these smartphones.
Yeah.
Anyone, it's too easy. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But like anything that's free, cheap, and easy, that's not high value. That's not high quality. And we can all be better than that. Every one of us. I don't care what anyone tells you. You can be better than that. You can always be better. I can always be better.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect. This isn't the final form of me. I've got so much that I want to do, and that's not going to stop until I take my last breath. But
dude, that's awesome.
Channel that energy.
I love that. And when people tell me about their issues and what they want to do, I just want to grab them by the shoulders and go, you can. You got this. If you want to do this thing, if you truly want it, you will find a way to do it. And you'll fall, but get back up. You know, there is no failure. There's nothing bad about failing. There's only negativity in choosing not to get back up and choosing not to put the weight back on your shoulder and continue up that mountain that you're climbing. So, bro,
Exactly.
We've been talking for a little over an hour now. We could talk for hours about this. You know, there's
Right.
so much good information to be shared. And I definitely will have to do a follow up in the future. Maybe some more specific topics.
Yeah, and I'd love to have you on my podcast as well.
That'd be incredible, man. You know, people like you truly make this world a better place, and so it's an honor to have you on the show. Before we end this, where can they find you on social media?
I'm only active on Instagram, so you can find me at NaturePilled. It's all one word, NaturePilled, NaturePilled. That's the only platform I'm active on. I don't use Facebook. I don't use really anything else. So you're more than welcome to follow me on there.
Please do.
Yeah, what I've said on this podcast is what I'm about. What you see is what you get. So it's not really subject to change. That's the direction I'm staying in.
Yeah, hell yeah, bro. Well, it was an honor having you on. Everyone who's watching this, please go follow him. The information that I see on a daily basis from this guy broadens my horizons and it also allows me to be a better person. I know that regardless of where you are in life, you will benefit from hearing his view and perspective on so real topics that just don't get talked about. So everyone who's watching this, if you enjoyed it, please go follow him. Definitely be doing a follow-up in the future. But Devin, thanks for having me on. Or thanks for coming on. And we'll talk to you later. Peace.
The honor's all mine, Colin. Thank you.